Warning: the following contains explicit language and subject matter that may not be suitable for younger listeners, church folk, and people who enjoy kale smoothies.
Yeah, well, I just moved to the area, and I was looking for some sort of workout, just to stay in shape.
Taekwondo is terrific for keeping in shape, but it's also a deadly serious killing system. I mean, it's probably the best of all martial arts.
I hear Jiu Jitsu is really good for balance.
Jiu Jitsu sucks. What you want is Taekwondo. It's got everything: mental, physical.
Well, that's good, because when I was in school abroad, I really got into yoga, and that's a lot of breathing techniques and meditation.
Meditation's terrific and all, but never heard of it saving anyone from a gang rape type situation. Meditate on that. Rape.
APodAmongstMen. All right, this is episode 5. Yeah, I think it's episode 5. Either way, you can see it in the show notes. I'm here. I have a special guest here, my man Jack Kennedy. Jack, say hello.
Hello. Not very special.
That's all right. Listen, I'm not special either. This whole thing ain't special. It's just regular dudes. I brought Jack in. Jack is something of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu whiz, so to speak. Well, compared to me, everybody's a whiz. But now, you wanna explain your involvement in BJJ? Like, you're a teacher, or are you just a student? I know you taught a class today, right?
Well, you're always a student.
Good point.
Okay, but I mainly teach law enforcement. I occasionally teach, just anybody who's practicing, but I specialize in law enforcement, combatives, I guess.
All right. Now, you train any other martial arts besides?
I used to dabble in boxing and kickboxing, but shoulder injury was limiting my jab, so you can't really be much of a boxer without a jab.
Yeah, that sucks a little bit.
Yeah.
I had a couple elbow problems with boxing.
Yeah.
When you first start, any real gym, any coach is gonna make you just drill the same motions over and over, just get the muscle memory. So I remember my first couple months boxing, actually trying to take it serious, just from jab, over and over and over. I got almost like a tennis elbow.
Yep.
But after a while, it went away.
Yeah. I
feel like anybody who's done martial arts, especially jiu-jitsu, everybody's got some kind of bad shoulder. Do you notice that? I feel like it's shoulder or hips. I have a couple injuries from high school, but they're nothing to do.
They'll come back to bite you, though.
What's that?
They'll come back to bite you.
Well, they never really went away, They just kind of learned to live with them.
Yeah.
I fell off a garbage, a dumpster one time. I worked at no. I worked at a bagel shop. The bagel shop that was on 28. And I was teaching, we had a new guy, and I was teaching him how to use the garbage compactor. And it was just so jam-packed. When it gets jammed like this, you can just get up and step on it and kind of jam it down with your foot. And of course I jammed it down, and I fell, and I landed on my arm, and next thing you know, I had a jacked up shoulder. I never went to the doctor. I was too embarrassed to say what happened.
Right.
So I just knew that when we still played dodgeball back then, I'm I'm not going to throw, I'll just defend. How long you been doing martial arts?
I've been training jiu-jitsu for 11 years.
Okay. You go to the same place over here the whole time, or you going to different schools?
I primarily trained at Alex Wilkie's in Bridgewater, but I've trained at there's more of a Sambo school in Middlesex, so I've trained there for a little while, and then I travel and I stop in other gyms, but Alex Wilkie's is my primary school.
And that's also where you teach too?
Yeah.
All right. Now, I know Americanized martial arts, in the sense where every mini mall has a karate school or something like that. Everybody's, what belt are you? Right. I noticed with jiu-jitsu, the belts, it takes way, way longer to progress through.
Yeah.
I always thought that was kind of cool, because it seemed like it meant something. Each rank, there was actually something you had to earn, as opposed to just, all right, well, you've been here for 6 months, so we'll give you the stripe now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How does it? What's the order go? For
you start off with a white belt. As an adult, you start with a white belt, and then most of the time you go to blue belt. There's a few schools that throw, I believe, a green belt in there, but that doesn't really count. So you go to blue belt, purple, brown, black. And once you're a black belt, there's different degrees, and then I think it's a 7th degree. There's a red and black belt, and then I think it goes to a solid red belt for like 9th and 10th.
You guys do the stripes in the end? Like,
Yeah, so you get 4 stripes before you get your next promotion.
Okay. How does it work? Like, the teacher, does he just decide when you're ready? Can you go at your own pace, or is it like an actual set time limit?
Well, there's no like standard for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So most schools, just the professor knows, and they say, all right, you're ready. And then other schools, it's based on, depending on if you're a white belt, every 25 sessions you get a stripe, and then eventually you get your blue belt. Other ones actually do like an actual formal test where you have to demonstrate a certain number of techniques.
Now, is it all technique? Is there any like written portion?
No.
So, I used to train Aikido, and we always had a written portion. But it was mostly just like BS, just make it seem like it was a little more intellectual than it really was.
Yeah, that's because that's that old Japanese.
Yeah, I noticed
mentality.
From doing that for years, a lot of the things you learn as you get older and you see more different styles, you start to be able to pick out certain techniques that are just unrealistic. And I felt like a lot of the stuff we did, like they always say, Aikido is like the old man's art.
Right.
But a lot of the stuff that a lot of these styles do is just not practical at all. So like when you actually got to do something that does have like a real world application, you could see like people's eyes light up. It's like, oh, I could use this. You know what I mean? But I feel like Jiu-Jitsu, I would say, I don't have the experience in Jiu-Jitsu, but it seems like a lot more of it, like a much higher percentage, is real world applicable instead of just like, it's not kata. It's not just you're learning a technique that looks cool, but you never really do it. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, like Joe Rogan always posts the videos of like fake martial artists and stuff. I feel like there's like real techniques that we had to learn in different styles that just, there's no way in hell it's ever going to work. Like, no. Well, like, do you think that Jiu-Jitsu has a much higher like percentage of,
not just specifically Jiu-Jitsu, but most grappling arts. Mm-hmm. So, high school and collegiate wrestling, whether it's Greco-Roman, whatever, freestyle wrestling, even judo, sambo, any grappling art, they're much more applicable to real life scenarios, and there's that like joke, like if you see somebody and you think you might want to fight them, you should look at their ears first. Yeah. And if you see the cauliflower ear, just run away. But the main thing is when you're drilling, grappling arts, even Jiu-Jitsu, like there is a little bit of striking in it, like the original old school Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from the old school Gracies, but generally it's just grappling, so there's no striking, so you're not worried about getting punched in the face and getting head trauma like you get from boxing. So just the learning and drilling, you're pretty much drilling live all the time. Mm-hmm. So whereas with other sports you can't really do that, like Krav Maga, you can't like practice gouging people in the eyes because you're going to run out of training partners pretty quick. With grappling, you can take people down live. You can pretty much choke them to the point where they're unconscious. Hopefully they tap before they go out, but like Joe Rogan said, you killed them. If they tap out, they're saying you killed me. Yeah. And it's one of the few sports where you can do that. So if something happens on the street, you're already used to drilling and going 100% against, a partner who's going 100%. And other sports, you can't do that.
Do you find like many guys you train with or anything like that, any of your students, they have like stories of actually using it in real world?
Oh yeah.
Even aside from you, I know you're in law enforcement, so obviously I'm sure you have experience, but just like, a regular dude.
Yeah, it's some of the Gracie Academy. So it's two brothers that run a school out in California. They teach all sorts of programs, and they do the Gracie breakdown. So if you watch online, if there's a real cool submission in a UFC, they'll do a breakdown. So they started doing law enforcement breakdowns and it started out usually as bad videos because there's a lot of cops that don't know what they're doing. But lately you've been seeing actually some cops who do know what they're doing and demonstrating it, against resisting suspects or whatever. And it's pretty cool to see now these body cams or cell phone cams of cops who actually, it's look like you're watching a grappling match, and they hit a nice takedown, and they go to a position, they control the guy, and next thing you know, he's in handcuffs. Nobody got hurt. It's minimal effort.
I think that as a cop, I think you're out of your mind to not want to learn some kind of technique. In that situation, you don't want to be like one of these guys from like the 70s who's been eating donuts all day. Like, you have nothing. What are you going to do if it's like a big dude you're not prepared.
And it's not always the big guys that cause the problems. You watch some of these videos, and it's these, little old grandma who, it takes 4 cops to take her down, and people are watching the video, like, screaming, like, how can it take 4 of you, But if somebody's resisting and they don't want to get arrested, or they don't want to go where you want them to go, they're going to put up a fight.
Well, I would think that that's almost a good sign. Like, it's a grandma and it takes 4 guys, probably because, no one's trying to be the one who, like, breaks grandma's leg. You know what I mean?
Let's hope that's what it is.
Well, let's hope. What do you think of, like, the body cam stuff? Because you made a good point. When you have the body cams, you could see, you could actually kind of, I don't know, like reenact kind of what was there. You get to see what happened in the moment. You could pick it apart, analyze it. You can even use it for teaching, new recruits or whatever.
So most cops probably feel the way I do. They have the pros and cons. Like, a lot of times when something's going on, the video winds up getting obstructed, because if I'm wrestling with somebody, we're usually, my chest is either against their chest or their back or on the ground, so you're not going to see anything anyway. And most of them are mounted center on the chest, so if your firearm's out and you're actually shooting at somebody, your gun's pretty much right in front of it, so they're not going to see a clear video of that. But there's been times we had them briefly. We've had technical issues with some of our body cameras, so we're working on fixing that. But I've actually had some pretty good footage that people are swearing up and down they didn't do something or say something, and I'm like, hey man, let's just watch the video, and they're like, no, it's okay, never mind, you're right. So they have their pros and cons, but generally most cops, we've had in-car camera for so long that nobody's afraid of being on camera. It's just more of the other people don't want to be on camera. It's not us. It's usually the other people that don't want to be recorded.
It seems like a great idea, just in terms of accountability and transparency.
Yep.
I mean, jeez. Anyway, it's just that. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Obviously, if the people that don't want to be on camera are usually the ones with something to hide.
Right.
I'd much rather it be the perp or whoever than the actual officer. Now, with you said you teach a class like geared towards law enforcement.
Yep.
What's different between that and a normal jiu-jitsu class? Like, how is that specialized?
We do sometimes 2-on-1 or even 3-on-1 against the suspect, working on handcuffing scenarios and some other things that in a traditional grappling class you wouldn't really do. You don't generally fight with weapons in a gi jiu-jitsu class, but our guys will conceal knives or guns, or we'll even start around, one guy has a knife, and so now you're not just fighting a person, you're fighting a person and we have the shock blade, so sometimes you get a little zap if you get cut.
Oh, really?
And, so we have, most of our training knives have a light and a siren, so if you get cut, it'll beep, but we also have a shock blade, so it sounds like a taser, and if you get cut with it, it feels like you're kind of getting sliced, and it'll...
That's actually badass.
Yeah, so it definitely kicks up the intensity a little bit when now you're not just trying to not get cut, but you don't want to get really electrocuted.
Well, that's good, because it lets you, kind of puts you in more of a situation. I think if you're training with rubber knives, you get hit, it makes no difference. You never slow down, you don't get distracted. In real life, that's not the case, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I always felt that, like, when we trained, we did a lot of, like, we tried to do some, like, real world scenarios. We always had, like, knife defense and everything like that. But that was the problem, is that if you actually did get tagged with it, you don't feel anything.
Right.
So there's nothing. It's not reflective of real life. You know what I mean? Where do you get that? A shock knife?
That's the name of I think it's the Shock Blade or something like that. Yeah, it's the name of the company, Shock Blade.
Oh, that's badass.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah. Have you done, like, as far as, like, I know you mentioned Sambo, like, do you try to incorporate other styles, or do you do specifically, like, is it MMA or is it just jiu-jitsu?
So at my school, they offer a bunch of different programs, but before I had kids, I had a little more time to train, so I did a lot more MMA focused training. My jiu-jitsu coach also has a background in wrestling and in judo, so we get to do a lot of cross training. So in the summer we'll go more no-gi, and we'll do more like straight traditional wrestling. And we also have a high-level black belt who was an Olympian for judo, so we get a lot of strict judo stuff with him. So it's nice to be able to train at one school and get a lot of cross training. And now my instructor does a lot of training at Marcelo Garcia's academy in New York, which is probably one of the highest level academies in the world. So he's bringing a lot of his stuff back to us. So we're getting a whole lot of wrestling, judo, not so much sambo. I was training with a guy from the Republic of Georgia doing that, which is a whole, that guy was like just throw me through walls, and the guy was nuts. But at Alex, we're doing quite a bit of grappling, different styles.
You ever run into any like yahoos or guys who just like idiots? You know what I mean? Like
At the school?
No, just from training with different schools, like running into different people within that world. Because I know, like, when I did martial arts, it wasn't like Jiu Jitsu wasn't the thing it is now. Like,
right.
UFC wasn't as big as it was now. Like, there was so many more, like the guys you would see in Joe Rogan's videos. There was so many more of those dudes. I felt like, and whenever you would go to like a convention or some kind of like a seminar, you'd always see them. They always had like 50,000 patches on the gis. Yep. Like they always look like a stock car.
They're about 100 pounds overweight.
Yeah, they always have like a ponytail or something. They always have, and somebody like an artist painted a picture of them that they always have at their dojo. You ever see that?
Yeah.
I mean, do you see that as much in jiu-jitsu?
Not really. There's. I haven't seen it, but I've seen like videos where you get guys who they give themselves a black belt or something, and they open a school and nobody knows, so people are joining there, and then all of a sudden somebody catches wind, and they almost like a stolen valor kind of thing. People like storm the gym and they're calling them out, and so I've only seen it online. I luckily haven't had to deal with that. Where I train, we actually only recently, probably 7 or 8 years ago, started back with like a traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program where belts were given out, all that. For a while it was just straight no-gi. There was no belts, no ranks. You just showed up, you rolled around, and then went home.
Yeah, I had my Aikido sensei. There was an issue where he had a newspaper was doing an article on him because he had a school was up and coming at the time. This is back in Pennsylvania, and he lied about something about having military background and who his teacher was, and lo and behold, he got called out for it. Like the article ran, and a bunch of people were like, "Yo, this is bullshit." And there was a big thing, and it was now if you look online for him, there's all this negative stuff about him, and it's like, well, you brought it on yourself, dude. Like it's like a stolen valor type thing.
Yeah, the internet makes it a lot harder to get away with that stuff.
And this is before the internet, so I don't know, somebody had their eye on him.
Yeah. Was his name Steven Seagal?
No,
oh.
It was actually my biological father.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's a shame because like we trained for so long and so many years, and I know like we learned. Actually learn stuff. It's not like it was just somebody making it up as it went, but it's always like you have to question what's the truth and where it came from and how much experience did you really have.
Well, that's what's cool about jiu-jitsu, because you do have that like pressure test where they could show you something, and now all of a sudden you're rolling live, and if you kind of know what you're doing, it's either going to work or it's not going to work.
It's going to show.
Right. So.
Well, I can't say. I mean, as much of a bullshitter as he was, he definitely knew how to handle himself. Because I've seen him throw some pretty big dudes around. But the style that he had, he claimed to have created his own branch off of Aikido. So there was a lot of influence of Jiu-Jitsu. Like we got to grapple a lot. We did a lot of stuff like that, and it wasn't like there was a lot of the old traditional techniques, but a lot of it was meant to be geared towards real life application. So we did it. We had our advanced class one day a week where it was anybody, it was brown belt or higher, and they would have to do just training like any situation, like if you're pressed up against the wall and the attacker has you, or if there's, like you said, multiple attackers, how to position yourself so you have to face one at a time instead of having them both team up on you. But there was real knowledge behind it, but unfortunately there's a lot of bullshit attached.
There's quite a bit of that out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of those guys. We went to a seminar in Florida, and it's just any sensei from all over the place. They all showed up, and there was some guys were really out there.
Yeah.
You see a lot of cool haircuts. A lot of guys trying to look like Chuck Norris, not really pulling it off.
Right. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, by the way.
Chuck Norris?
Yes, he is.
Chuck Norris is legit. Like he's one of the few guys who's legit, right?
Yeah.
They made the whole website about him, all the Chuck Norris facts. So some of that's got to be true. Now, how old's your son right now?
He's 5.5.
Do you have him? Is he interested in anything like that? Maybe train with him a little bit?
A little bit. I mean, he comes with me to a lot of the classes, but it's all adults. There's no other kids training, so like he'll mess around with my instructor, so he kind of knows what's going on. But he's so used to going to the school thinking he's going there to play, that when I do bring him there, like I'm like, today you're gonna train. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm going up in the cage, and we're gonna, we're bringing the action figures up there. So I got to work on breaking that. So I think I got to either bring him to a different school or, get him in wrestling or something.
Well, it's hard, but it's people that he's familiar with, and it's just too comfortable.
Yep, that's exactly the problem.
I have the same thing with my stepson. Like I try to train him in boxing a little bit, but it becomes like we play. So when it comes time, like you said, to teach him something, and it's time to learn. It's like, no, I'm good. I'm gonna play with the iPad.
Right.
Like, come on, dude. Like, let's work a little bit.
Yeah. Now my daughter, who's 3, will probably be training pretty soon because she has been watching it more than and not playing, and she actually is starting to pick some stuff up just by watching. And she'll take my son down and like pin him, and he's like crying, asking me to get her off, and I'm like, no, man, you got to figure that out, and I'll just let it go.
I think like the second kid is always the one who's more interested in what like the parent is into. Like the first kid's going, he wants to do his own thing. The second kid is like, no, let him go over there. I'll do it.
Yeah.
It's even funnier with a daughter too. 3 years old.
Yeah, if it was 2 boys, I'd probably break it up. But since she's a little, and she's tiny, like my son's a big kid, my daughter's tiny. If she gets on top, and I'm like, hey, go ahead. Let's see how long you can stay on top.
Do you wanted to train in like Jiu Jitsu specifically, or are you gonna let him just like what do you want him to do? You said wrestling.
I mean, any grappling art, really. I mean, wrestling's an awesome base for Jiu Jitsu. If you look at, not that I want my kid to be a UFC fighter. If he could, great, but I'm not like gonna have him be one of those kids that he can't eat any junk food and like Todd Marinovich or whatever. But
you want him to still be a kid,
right? Yeah, enjoy your life. Any grappling art, it's awesome base for jiu-jitsu and good discipline. It's a good workout. You rarely see fat wrestlers.
It's true.
I mean, sometimes they're starving themselves, but I mean, generally, they stay in good shape, and the work ethic. Like I train with a lot of former high school and college wrestlers, and these guys, between the bell, those guys don't know how to go even 99%. It's 100 or more. In between periods, they might be a little bit older now, and they're trying to catch their breath. But as soon as that bell rings again, they're going.
You can tell when somebody's got that mindset, like that fighter's mindset.
Yep, exactly.
There's no chill. It's just balls to the wall.
Right. Like they don't cut corners. They don't know how to go half speed. They don't take a round off. So the work ethic behind a wrestler is pretty good. So
do you think that's wrestling in particular, or do you think that's like a person-to-person thing, like a personal trait? You know what I mean? Like you think it's just them, like that have that trait?
I think generally wrestling coaches and higher level wrestlers expect that. And if you're not giving 100% during practice, you're probably not going to make it through the season.
Yeah, you probably don't get to a higher level.
Their
without
practices. I mean, it's not like they have like rest days. It's not like in football where it's Monday or Tuesday after a big game and you're going uppers and you're just watching film. Like in wrestling, they don't do that. It's all right. You're training today.
I wrestled in middle school, and that was
Yeah. So I think it takes a certain person to be a wrestler, and so I don't think that wrestling necessarily creates it, but I think that it weeds out the weak guys. So by the time you get to especially college, you're not going to have collegiate wrestlers who are half-assing every day and you're not going to make it.
Yeah, you just don't even make it through to that next level.
Right.
I want my son to do something, but I like martial arts, especially when it's kids, because it it teaches more than just self-defense. You get like the disciplinary aspect where it teaches a kid that he has to rely on himself. He has to be able to handle himself and follow directions and all that stuff. Like you're supposed to get it from school, I know, but there's always a lot of kids. It's not the same. Like with a martial art, I feel like it's different. It's like a personal responsibility that teaches you. You know that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I always did Taekwondo for a little while, and we did Aikido for years, and did karate, and I just like that atmosphere. I think that's great. There's a lot of good lessons to teach, especially like a young boy.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I mean, you're not going to get it from watching cartoons.
No.
But it's something I want him to do. So I'd like to get there eventually. There's not a lot of. I feel like there's a lot of schools around here, and not a lot like anything groundbreaking. You know what I mean? Like there's no great schools where everybody's like, oh, you go this place, you go that place. Like Wilkie's is definitely one of those places because it's the only place that does real jiu-jitsu around here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like anything else? Like, it's either that or you're just getting...
Well, Jiu-Jitsu is getting so big now that there's schools popping up everywhere, but now you have to worry about the legitimacy of the school.
Absolutely.
You know, but if you're looking for other martial arts, I mean, that's where you also have to be careful. But you know, I mean, there's a school, you know, out in Clinton, there's in Greenbrook, and those are all legit schools. But there's, you know, every day they're opening up. Even Tiger Showman's, they're not Tiger Showman's Karate anymore. They're Tiger Showman's MMA, and they do, you know, their own jiu-jitsu program and stuff like that. You got to be careful with because you don't know who's coaching it. You know, they get a guy's like a blue belt and he's coaching. You know,
I get leery of any place that has like a mascot on their on their school. You know what I mean? Anything too corporate, like franchised, you kind of lose the quality of the teaching.
Right.
But I mean, Tiger Schulman's, I know they claim to have like certification for all their instructors, but you know, who knows? Because to the layman, that you could be doing anything.
Yeah.
They don't know any different.
You sit in a classroom for one day. Here's your certificate.
Yeah.
And
So I did
congrats.
the 2-day seminar in Boca Raton.
Right.
So I got my certificate.
And I paid $3,000 for it.
Yeah. All right. All right. Luckily, we can just cut off all the dead space.
Yeah.
That's easy. Now, with your son, do you think there's any specific lessons, anything he could learn specifically from doing martial arts that you want to impart on him? Because I know, like, think of like Karate Kid. Like, there's good schools and bad schools. There's good lessons, bad lessons. So you have the Cobra Kai. They learn strike first, strike hard, no mercy.
Right.
And then Miyagi, he teaches a bit more like it's for self-defense, a bit more compassionate to protect yourself and innocent people, not so much just to fight.
Right.
Like, do you find that do you find that there's do you find that there's kids who get the wrong idea just from seeing like martial arts, like in the sense of like the bullying idea where they just want to use it on someone and not so much they're not learning the lesson that it should be for self-defense?
I think that with jiu-jitsu specifically, you don't really see that because it's, even though it's can at times be an aggressive sport, obviously, especially at like higher level, you get guys that are going 1,000 miles an hour. But I wouldn't be surprised if with kids MMA specific, because now there's like schools opening up that are specifically like mixed martial arts schools. So they're teaching everything, and these kids are coming in with their mohawks, and their tap out shirts, and these kids want to be like John Jones, and they're like 7, 8 years old, and I think with that you might start to see issues with kids who just think that they can throw Superman punches, if a kid looks at them wrong, maybe, because that they're getting that attitude, because UFC specifically, even maybe Bellator a little bit, is turning closer into like the World Wrestling Entertainment, where you have these guys and you're more focused on their character than their talent, and because they're trying to sell fights, and kids are starting to like idolize the fighter and not like the fighting styles.
That's how
so
Conor blew that up.
Right. So you got like Conor McGregor throwing water bottles across at press conferences.
I'd fucking kill you.
Right. So I mean, I think that could be a bigger issue, but at a specific Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, where if you look at like quote unquote pro grappling, there's a little bit of that going on, because now they're even starting to get pay-per-views with pro grappling, and these guys are trying to sell their fights. So you're starting to see a lot of like social media, they're going back and forth, and it's getting a little heated, but it's nowhere near on the level with like John Jones and Dan Cormier and all those guys where they're
they're never gonna top UFC.
No. But so you don't really see it that much in jiu-jitsu. Like I've had tournaments where I've went against like so-called like rival schools, and then next thing like I'm like best friends with the guy by the end of the tournament, even though we just fought each other in our schools, different schools, so I've never seen it with just jiu-jitsu. I mean, there have been, obviously, like there's always going to be guys that don't get along, but I don't think jiu-jitsu specifically like breeds that mindset of I'm a tough guy and I'm going to go out and fight everybody.
I think anything, alcohol brings that out of anybody.
Yeah.
But now that you're saying that, I really don't think I've ever met anybody who was like a serious martial artist, anybody who actually trained like regularly, that actually had that bad attitude. I feel like anybody who had like that bullying attitude, that bullying personality, they never stuck around. Like they never made it through classes. You know what I mean? Like,
well, so with jiu-jitsu, it's especially if you're a beginner, if you're new to the sport, it is the most humbling experience you'll ever have, because even a blue belt who has been training for 1 or 2 years has 1,000 times the talent. Even if you're a big, strong, tough guy, a guy half your weight will have his way with you. Now if you have like a wrestling background, obviously that could change things. But like when I think I might have still been a white belt, might have been a blue belt. I went against a guy who was a little bit smaller than me, but he was an Olympic boxer, and he came in, and he thought he was going to be this, big tough guy because he legit was an Olympic boxer, and he left halfway through the class because he was so frustrated that he was doing poorly. And I'm like, hey man, we're just drilling. Like you're going next. You get to do the same thing. But he couldn't understand it because he wasn't used to fighting on his back, fighting on the ground. Just that the distance is so much different. There's very few martial arts where you're fighting. You're basically like hugging each other, for lack of better terms. Which is awkward for a lot of people and uncomfortable. So this guy was an Olympic boxer, and he went halfway through a class and left.
As a boxer, you have nothing. You can't use any of your tools that you have for jiu-jitsu. None of it is.
And even in MMA, I mean, if you get a good grappler, they're going to tie you up, and your strikes are now out the door because your arms are tied up and you're like a pretzel. So,
I think that was like the appeal of MMA, is that it took the best parts of all these different styles and combined them so you're prepared for any type of situation. Like you're not just a stand-up fighter, you're not just a grappler. I think that was what made it as awesome as it was. I think that's why people like watching UFC now. I mean, definitely more than boxing, but UFC's not as corrupt as boxing is.
Right.
Boxing
a lot more money in boxing.
Yeah, well, boxing is just all mobbed up.
Yeah.
Like everybody's getting an envelope full of cash after the fight, So you can't really. And the way they do it, it's a blatant bullshit. Like they have a big fight and use a clear winner. Everybody's watching, and they don't know it's a draw just so they can get money on the rematch. I think people got fed up with that. I know I did.
I did.
Well,
I stopped watching boxing probably in high school.
I didn't stop watching, but I got fed up. I just won't pay. I stopped paying for it now. Like I wait till like 2 days after the fight. It's on YouTube.
Right.
The same thing, I got to see the fight, but I don't want to give them my money. Just on principle. What was it the Wilder fight? Like that one, I thought that was a good fight. That was one of the ones where I wasn't too upset about the decision. Did you happen to watch that?
No.
Wilder Fury.
No.
It was a good fight. Fury was doing good the whole time, and then he caught one and got dropped in the end, but he just shot right back up. I think I would have been looking for my head after that punch, but sheepdog response. Now, it's a term I've heard a lot over the years, especially like I used to be big into like guns and stuff. Like I kind of just toned it down over the last few years just because it's expensive.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But there's a term I heard a lot. It's a sheepdog response. Like now, I know it's a company. I know they teach courses.
Yep.
But is that like is it just a term or is it just a company? Like is it something
the only place I've seen it, and I've seen that specific term, was in Dave Grossman's book on combat, which the sheepdog term itself I think kind of originated from that book. He did an interview with some old school Vietnam vet, and he talks about the sheep, the wolves, and the sheepdogs. So then at some point in that book, he talks about like a sheepdog response. So like there's something going on, and hey, I need to go that way and fix it or help or do whatever, and he referred to it as a sheepdog response. So I'm assuming that's where the company got the name from. I can't be sure of that. I could ask him, but I assume that's where that term came from.
Now, for the listeners, you want to kind of give them an idea of what that actually is, of what a sheepdog response is. Like obviously, the sheepdog is supposed to protect the sheep and drive off the wolves. And
Right.
It's supposed to be like.
So basically, you have the sheep is basically a non-violent, person who's just going about their business, doing their thing, and then you got the wolves who are prone to violence and they prey on the sheep. And then the sheepdog is someone who is capable of being violent and knows how to use violence when it's appropriate, typically to protect the sheep from the wolves. And then the sheepdog response would be the sheepdog sees, somebody being hurt, so they go in that direction and they help them out.
That seems like the simplest concept, but that to me is the ideal version of what masculinity should be. It's like
pretty much
capable of violence, but using it only in appropriate situations. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, I think that's like the difference to like that whole like toxic masculinity versus actual masculinity. That's two different things. Like, real masculinity is not toxic, and I think that is a great concept that any man, well, any guy should really try to strive for. Like, you should be prepared. You should be able to handle yourself in those type of situations and have the self-confidence to know that you can step in if something was to happen. You don't want to be the guy hiding in the closet while people are banging down the door.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like on Titanic, you got jumps in a boat. You know, like you don't want to be that guy.
There's Billy Zane.
Yeah.
That's a movie I always quote with my one buddy that's on the episode coming out this week. Anytime there was a scene when they were, after they hit the iceberg and they're going through the lower levels, and the one guy brings their Rose downstairs and there's all water, and he's like, I'm going back up. Anytime we would have to like do anything at work, we would always quote that sometimes. Sheepdog response. So they teach courses. Like, what do these courses consist of?
So they do 2 or 3 day, typically 2 or 3 day courses. They do courses specifically for they do what they call an occupational course, which would be for anybody who, for their job, has to carry a firearm. So police, military, private security, whatever the case is. And then they do one for civilians, which is slightly more toned down because typically they're not always, but they have a little bit less training, so they focus more on absolute basic fundamentals with firearm proficiency, grappling, striking, whatever. Then they also do a rifle course. They do, and then they do specialty courses. So they now they do women specific courses. So they do a women's sheepdog course, which is the same thing: the weapons, the firearms, the grappling, all that. And then I think they do like a women's grappling or self-defense kind of specific thing. But it's focused on learning and becoming proficient with the basics of firearms, specifically handguns, and then just basic combatives. So unarmed defense, and then also fighting with guns and knives and shock blades. And then they also go into some other stuff, focus on like mindset, so situational awareness, and just the most basic things, like when you're walking through Wegmans, look in front of you and not at your phone the whole time, and being a little bit aware of what's going on around you, because the first way to not die is to not be somewhere where you could die. So if you see a fire, like walk the other way kind of thing. So that's the basis of their course. They have guys from the special forces, like pretty bad dudes teaching their courses, and I'm lucky enough to have done several of their courses with them, and I think I've gotten a little better at what I do, from training with those guys.
You just made me think of something. When you talk about having that situational awareness, like not looking at your phone, I feel like being a dad makes you realize how much we do that. Like when you're walking around with the kids, it's like, hey, pay attention. You're gonna walk into that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I have to, and it makes me stop and think, like, Jesus Christ, how many times am I walking around trying to text while I'm walking to the grocery store?
Yeah.
Like that's.
Yeah, you need to keep your head up.
Absolutely. So with these courses, I mean, obviously, we're getting into like the whole idea of the whole concept of firearms. I think that now, you know me, I'm definitely a fairly liberal dude, but I'm not in the sense, like, I'm not like that follow the checklist down or you have to believe in this. Like, right. I spent a lot of times with guns, trained a lot with guns. I think that that's a valuable thing that everybody should know, especially if you're a homeowner, you have a family.
Yep.
Like, there's no reason you shouldn't have a firearm in your house, but at the same time, you should be realistic about it and actually take the time to learn about it and train yourself.
Yeah.
You don't want to be one of these guys who just leaves it in the nightstand and the kid finds it.
No.
I feel like that happens way too much. Like I think it's certainly a dangerous thing, but that's why it requires that level of training and educating yourself, especially the other people in your house.
Yep.
Like I feel like too many people are just I just don't like guns. Like, well, somebody's gonna have a gun one day, and you don't like them, but that doesn't matter to them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this guy. He's a lieutenant from, I think, Minnesota, but he was first responding officer at a terror attack at I think it was a mosque or some house of worship, but he shows up and within seconds to get out of his car, takes a rifle round down his throat, gets shot a bunch of other times, still fights, and takes the bad guy out, survives. And his quote is one of my favorite ones. He says, if you knew you have to fight for your life tomorrow, how will you train today? So if you buy a gun with the purpose of having it in your home and potentially need to defend your home against a bad guy, you can't just go and buy it, throw it in a nightstand or in a safe and expect that when that door gets kicked in at 2 in the morning, you're going to all of a sudden have this miraculous moment where you grab it, you rack the slide, you run, down the steps and get in this awesome gunfight like in Die Hard or something, it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen that way in real life.
You're not going to be John Woo.
No, you're going to be, your hands are going to be shaking like crazy. You're probably going to rack it wrong, and now you got a malfunction. So now have you drilled malfunction drills because your gun's out of battery? If you train properly, this stuff happens automatically. I can't tell you how many times I've been at the range and I've heard instructors, yelling something, and then down the road I'm training and I experience that and I can hear them yelling in my head, whatever the issue was, fix it, and I'm doing it automatically because I've done it so many times.
Stay ready. You never have to get ready.
Right. So if you train enough, these things are. I hate to use the term muscle memory because it's.
No, I use it.
There's debate.
There's
debate about whether things are actually will things will start to happen automatically. Every day when I go to work, anytime I pick up a firearm that I am picking up for the first time, I press check it, and I never used to do that. And I assumed every time I do something, I'm doing it right, and I was at the range doing one of these courses. And I go to fire my first round and the gun's empty. And the first thing I thought of was I didn't check the status of my gun. So, my gun was empty. I thought it was loaded. I messed up, and I fixed it quick. But ever since that day, every time I pick up, whether it's my rifle, my handgun, it doesn't matter what it is, I press check it. So I check to make sure it's clear when I want it to be clear. And when I load it, I make sure it's loaded, and I do it every time. Because I made that one mistake. Yeah, luckily, it was in training, though.
Absolutely. If you're going to make that mistake, that's the place to make it.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think about? Obviously, being in law enforcement, and also now we're talking about guns. People, I get all these different sides of the gun debate. Obviously, any reasonable person is not saying we want to ban guns. That's ridiculous. What do you think is a common sense reform that we could do? Because obviously, there's a lot of people with guns, but they don't have them legally. So making a bunch of laws isn't going to stop that.
Right.
What do you think is a responsible way to go about that problem? Obviously, you hear one of the things I've heard that I like is that if you have to take a driver's ed course to drive a car, why shouldn't you have to do that to own a firearm? It just seems like that would be a common sense thing. It's not preventing any reasonable person from owning one. Yeah. Just making sure you're educated on, the usage.
You should know how to use a firearm if you're going to pick it up. I kind of like the way New Jersey does it. Not our laws, but the way our purchasing process. There is a background check done. You have to get the permits to buy each handgun, which I'm not really a fan of that because there's a time limit, so you only have 90 days, so you have to plan ahead, but and it takes forever. So if it was a little more streamlined, it'd be a little better. But I don't mind the fact that I need a firearms ID card, and then I have to get the permits, which you can get 3 at a time. So if you're planning on buying one, I always buy 3 anyway because they're only $2. But other than that, the background check's done when you get your firearms ID card, and then if you need more permits, they do another background check when you get your permits, and then when you actually purchase the firearm at the dealer, they're doing the next check, so you're doing another background check, so you're having 2 to 3 background checks done for each purchase. So when you get your firearms ID card, there's one done then, that's your initial, and then if you get permits, 10 years down the road, they're doing another background check plus the next check. So I think it's a pretty good system. It's obviously the government's running it, so there are flaws, and it takes quite a bit of time. Some towns you get a permit back maybe 3 or 4 weeks. Other towns it could be, 2 or 3 months, maybe more.
I think when I did it in Maryland, it was 6 weeks.
Yeah, most departments are pretty good about it, but
it's the whole the process doesn't seem especially hard. You just got to fill out the paperwork, get it fingerprinted, and then You know, the rest of it's just waiting.
Right.
So I mean, I don't think that's bad.
It's not terrible.
Yeah. I mean, I think if people are going to complain about that, they're probably just looking for something to complain about. You know.
There are some people legit complaints because if you got to wait like 3, 4, 5 months.
Well, yeah.
You know,
okay. If you're waiting that long, I'm saying like
there are some places that you are waiting that long.
Like
it's
in
not
Jersey
common.
or
yeah,
other
no, in
states?
New Jersey, like certain towns. I don't know if they let them stack up before they process all of them. I don't know what they're doing, but you know, maybe they're just too busy. I don't know, but
okay.
I mean, if you get a permit within a month, then I guess you can wait a month.
Do you think that that owning a firearm is something everybody should do? Like, do you think that that's...
I think everyone should have the right to, but I don't know if everyone should. I don't know if the people who should would admit, like, I'm not the person to own a gun. Maybe they would, but I think everyone should have the right and the opportunity to own one.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think you need to look inside and be like, hey, I'm not the most stable person, so maybe I'll hold off,
Yeah.
you know?
And if you're not the most stable person, you're probably less likely to admit that.
Right, exactly, you know,
And
everything's
then,
fine.
yeah, then you get into that hairy conversation of like, all right, well, who gets to decide who's eligible and who's not? You know
Right.
what I mean? So that's... All right, well... I don't see any disagreement here with where we stand on that. I think a lot of people just have the volume turned up on just nonsense. You know, there's too many people with too much to say who and not enough knowledge behind it.
Right, and the knowledge part is big because you have these politicians who are proposing laws, and they clearly at these conferences they're running, they show they have zero knowledge of firearms, you know, and they're talking about laws that they're proposing, and there's literally no issue with, you know, what they want to ban or what they want to change, but they know that any change will make them look better than if there's no change, you know.
Everything just seems like a roundabout kind of...
Yeah, like
thing.
in New Jersey, you can't have a bayonet lug on your rifle. I can't remember the last time someone was killed with a bayonet, but you can't have a bayonet lug in New Jersey on an AR-15. So, but it's a new law, so hey.
Hey, a
somebody's
K-bar
happy.
and some duct tape will fix that problem.
Right.
It just seems like anybody who's in the position to make these decisions, like as politicians, anything like that, it just seems like it's so tribal that there's no real conversation going on. There's no compromise, you know? Like you're either 100% everything flies or, you know, a bunch of nonsense, like you said, like bullshit laws that don't actually solve any problems. It just gives them a talking point.
Right.
You know, and that's what I'm not in favor of. I'm more in favor of people having a real conversation with what can be done. I mean, obviously there's... Like, I know we could both agree that there's just too much gun violence, but that doesn't mean that a reasonable person shouldn't be allowed, you know, their right, you know, in the Constitution to own a gun. So it's just like there's not enough common sense.
Right.
So like the common sense laws that we have here with the background checks, I think that's easy. It's a no-brainer. So I don't understand why other places wouldn't want to have that. It just seems like obviously guns are fun. Like if you're a gun enthusiast, not that it's a toy, but it's, you know, when you go to the range, you enjoy it.
Yeah,
you have a good time. It's exhilarating.
I just watched a video of a guy who's had Parkinson's for like 5-6 years, you know, and I think they call him like Shaky Dan or something like it. And you know, it's typical Parkinson's. You know, his hands are real shaky. He has the awkward walk from his legs shaking, and he's like, as soon as I pick a firearm up, you know, it calms me down, and I stop shaking. And he runs like three gun tournaments. He's like running through this course, and it's like you watch the guy at his house, and then you watch him on the range. I mean, it's like two different people. So I mean, that thing's calming him down. And it's
the best line.
It's like medicine for him.
The best line anyone ever had. Somebody said, "Oh, what's it like having a gun?" It's like, really, honestly, you want to know? I said, yeah. It's like having a second dick. That was Seth Rogen in Superbad.
Yep.
But it really is. Like I've seen people. I took a friend of mine to the range one time, and just like the look on his face when he fired the first round, he's like, "Whoa, okay, I get it now." It's like you understand right away. Like we were driving back, he's like, "I shoot guns now, motherfucker."
Yeah.
He was proud of himself, but at the same time, like, yeah, everybody understands that there's a responsibility. Any reasonable people understand that.
And if you do own them, you should. I mean, I don't know if the law should mandate that you train. It's a good idea, but training should be like the number 2 thing. Like, I want to buy a gun, so I just put a down payment on a gun. I'm waiting for my permit. So while I'm waiting, I'm going to start looking for courses so I can do some training. Because if I buy a gun and I can't, you know, hit a the broadside of a barn from 15 yards, it's not going to help me in a self-defense application, you know. So, you know, there's always like the joke, like, oh, it's tax return season, I'm getting back like $3,000. What gun should I buy? And it's like, oh, is this $2,500 rifle or this, you know, $3,000 rifle? And everybody's like, no, buy that $1,200 rifle, buy about $1,000 worth of ammo, and then spend the rest on training, and there you go. You know, you don't need a $3,000 rifle.
Absolutely. How easy is it to find like a training course or any kind of instructors like that? Because
it's pretty easy. There's tons of guys. I mean, all these guys are coming out of the military now. You know, you have so many special ops guys and law enforcement SWAT guys that are retiring and starting up companies, and these are like legit. They're not just some Joe Schmo who's been shooting for 20 years. Like, these are guys who have been trained by the best, or they may be the best, and they've actually applied these tactics, you know, in pretty bad scenarios, and now they want to, you know, share what they know. And the classes are, I mean, some of them are kind of expensive, but, you know, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So if you
only pay $25, you're probably not going to learn that much.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, you spend $500 for a 1 or 2 day class probably, and then, you know, what you take from that class, you can continue and build upon it, and, you know, you're now going to be a much better shooter. And, you know, I mean, think about it. If you do use your gun in self-defense, especially a cop, you know, you're in the middle of Times Square and you got to shoot somebody, and you miss, and now you shoot 3 innocent bystanders. You know, that $500 worth of training could have saved you how many millions of dollars, you know, in a lawsuit. You know,
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Hit 2 civilians in an Iron Man.
Right.
Times Square. Yeah, like a simple Google search. You could just.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you find me on Instagram.
Oh no, we're gonna put your tag in here at the end.
Yeah, I mean, no, but if you ask anybody who is like a gun guy, they're gonna know like who they are. Like, social media has made it so much easier to find, you know, just even local. I mean, everybody's traveling all these classes, so you know they might only be in your area once a year, so you might miss that one, but you find somebody else. But it's not hard to find decent training. You know, we're close to Pennsylvania. There's usually courses going on at ranges in PA. A lot of ranges run their own courses. So even if you don't find like some, you know, Delta operator who's going to run a carbine course for you, you could at least go to, you know, your local range, and they probably have a decent NRA certified firearm instructor who can teach you the basics. You know, I mean, if you want to start shooting through car windows and, you know, doing some crazy things, you might have to wait. But
I did a couple in South Jersey, or like way South Jersey, but it was a huge outdoor range, and then it had like an indoor range. So it was 2 classes I did. One of them, it was in the indoor side, and they did all low light shooting. So it was like shooting from cover, and oh Jesus, they had it was like an old police, like the lights on top of the police car. They had like old ones hanging up in the back of the room, so we turn all the lights off and just have those flashing. That was really cool, because you would shoot from like laying down, so you would have cover here and try to hit the target. And then I did another one where we did all like jamming scenarios. So like you're
working malfunctions.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they have a shoot house, so it's like you know, literally like rooms you have to go in, and you work on clearing corners and stuff like that, which we really didn't get into that much because it was late in the class, and it was kind of like the instructor was saying, you know, let's go in here for the last half hour.
Right.
But there's so many crazy things that, if you think about it, it's common sense. Of course, you would have to shoot around a corner if you have a weapon for self-defense or home defense. Like, that just makes sense. Like, well, if you're just going to buy the weapon and just keep it in your closet and then never think about it until something happens, you're probably going to be very unprepared.
Yeah.
So,
and that's some of the hardest stuff, and when it comes to like firearm and like tactics, moving through rooms and all that, that's like the hardest stuff, especially by yourself, is, you know, making entry into a room with nobody to cover your back and all that. Like, I've been to courses where they go over that stuff, and, you know, for home self-defense, grab your family or go into their room, shut the door, and don't clear your house. Like, let the police show up, or let a team do it, because that's like some of the hardest stuff. And if you're by yourself, you need some legit training and a lot of practice to be pretty good at like moving through a house, clearing corners and all that. It's you know, you don't want to get killed.
So you think the best idea, if you're in a situation like that where, you know, you have an intruder coming in, the best situation would be to keep your family, you know, in a room and wait for...
Yeah, I mean, you got to kind of figure it out how your house is laid out and how many, you know, people are in your house and who's where. But, you know, get them all into one room so that you know they're all safe. Shut the door, and hopefully you have a firearm on you and put it right towards that door and hold up till the police show up, I guess, and let them take care of it. That's my recommendation.
Good advice, though.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be clearing that house by yourself.
Yeah, you don't want to be trying to be John Wick.
No, I mean, it'd be cool if you could.
That would be awesome.
I'd love to be John Wick. At least get his training.
Yeah. You saw the video of Keanu Reeves.
Oh yeah, yeah,
him
he's
training for the
legit.
movie.
Yeah.
And he really learned the shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like that was really cool. Now you teach a course yourself, firearms course?
No.
Oh, okay. You said I'm on Instagram as if you could.
No, but I can certainly point you in the right direction.
All right.
I mean, if you are going to take a course, I would probably recommend Sheepdog Response, just because, in my opinion, you need to be somewhat proficient with firearms and with combatives, because sometimes, especially if you're law enforcement, in New Jersey, unfortunately, not too many people can carry a firearm concealed, but if you're carrying a firearm and something happens, you can't always get to that gun right away. You might have to use your hands. So you need to be competent with unarmed defense. But you can't just know how to shoot a gun because, like I said, you can't always get that gun out or you can't get to it. So you need to know how to fight with your hands. But sometimes your hands aren't good enough. I'd rather, if a guy got a knife and I got some distance, I'd rather shoot him than try to disarm him.
Yeah.
So you need to be competent with your firearm and with your hands. And Sheepdog Response offers training of both. Yeah, so you're basically spending half a day on the mats, and it's a long, hard day. You bring a lot of water, but you're basically doing like 6 hours on the mats and 6 hours at the range both days. And they're long days, but you get a ton of training, and you basically just need to continue what you do there for those 2 days. You're not, if you do 2 days with anybody, no matter how much training you do,
You're gonna be burnt out.
Well, but if you just leave it at that, a year down the road,
Yeah.
you're not going to be
You
able
get
to
rusty.
do what you did.
Yeah.
So if you take those 2 days and just continue, every day, every couple days, dry fire, get to the gym, roll with somebody, then you're going to continue to build on it. But if you do any course, if you go to you spend $1,000 on a 1-day course with the best shooter in the world, if you don't shoot again for 2 years or practice any of it, it's out the door. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that you got to continually just dry firing in your house, working on your grip, working on all that stuff. If you don't practice it, it's a lost art. So
You mentioned concealed carry. Like I know it's hard, especially in New Jersey, to get that permit. But like realistically, like who would really need that? So, like what kind of people? Like what kind of what kind of line of work would you be in where you might need it? You know what I mean? Like what's the?
You're talking about for New Jersey specific?
Just for anybody in general.
Well, most states you're allowed to carry. Anybody can carry. They have constitutional carry, or they have laws that give you the ability to carry. New Jersey, you need, I forget what the term, justifiable need or whatever the term is, but so basically nobody. But I mean, I carry everywhere I go. Why not? I can. If I don't have it and I need it, then luckily I have a good runner, so I can at least maybe get some distance, and so I don't get shot. But I don't know. I mean, better to have it and not need it.
But do you feel like what's the percentage of something? Like what's the chance that something would happen? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
Like,
well, I do know that I forget the exact number, but the percentage of active shooters that have been stopped by concealed carry holders, whether it's a off-duty law enforcement or just a civilian who has a concealed carry permit, it's much higher than anybody would think. It's like 30 or 40% of active shooters that were stopped. Obviously not by suicide, because most of them end by suicide, but it's much higher than anybody would think.
I feel like a lot of those situations don't even make the news, like with active shooters, or at least they might only be local. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. They label everything an active shooter, and that's half the problem. But a lot of these, whether it's even like a robbery or something in progress, like just the fact that you draw your firearm and you display it as, it's usually referred to as constructive authority. So I draw down on somebody. That's how most of them are stopped. Like robberies and then carjackings, whatever. A concealed carry holder draws down on the guy. They give up. Okay. party's over.
Now, say you're like just a civilian, you have your concealed carry permit. Say you're in a situation where there is a shooter and you do react and you actually put the guy down. Now, there's always like the urban legend where it's like, oh, somebody broke into my house and I shot him and now I'm going to be going to jail. You know what I mean? Like, is there anything in the law where you can be prosecuted? Like, if you were, say there was like a robbery going on and you use your firearm and you took that guy out, like, just obviously for a good reason. It wasn't like it was just somebody walking down the street.
I would probably say, number one, it depends on the state, because certain states have laws, almost encouraging it. Other states don't have those laws, so you're kind of on your own. In your home, it's different because you have certain states with castle doctrines which allow basically deadly force, almost in any circumstance if somebody breaks in your house. In other states, they don't have that. So like New Jersey, if you can, you're supposed to retreat. So, I mean, if you're locked in your bedroom and they kick your door in, I don't know how you're going to retreat from that. But I mean, typically the standard is if you can reasonably articulate, why you believe that either somebody else, so a carjacking or, whatever, somebody or yourself is in imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, you can use deadly force. But, let's say it's a carjacking, but, the guy starts to walk away because he changes his mind and now you shoot the guy. Well, you probably messed up, So it really comes down to like every single incident is its own case. You can't just say, if they do this, you're good. I mean, that's why it takes training, because maybe I draw down on the guy and he gives up and I'm good, but then I shoot him because he had a gun, but he was trying to put it down. I don't know. I mean, if he's pointed at me and then he starts to put it down, that scenario completely changed just by him starting to put it down. I can't shoot the guy now. If he's pointing at me, I might be in trouble.
I think with social media, with all these videos you see now with like police encounters, that people are starting to realize that nothing's cut and dry. Everything is complicated. Everything is shades of gray.
That's the issue with the body cameras, because you're only looking at one angle. So now if you have a car camera and a body camera, maybe you might have two angles. Then you throw cell phone or security footage. Now you have who knows how many camera angles, and it can change it. There's a really good video that gets used for training, and I forget if it's a body cam but you got like a cop running after somebody down like the side of a building, and I forget one of the cops. There's another guy running, so they're closing in on the guy from each angle of the building, and one of them shoots the guy. And from the first angle they show you, it looks like a bad shoot, and then they cut to an angle from the other side, and you see the guy has like a gun behind his back, and he's starting to bring it forward, but you can't see that in the first camera angle. The other cop sees it, and he shoots him, and then they're like, "All right, was that a good shoot or bad shoot?" Everybody's like, "Oh, it's a terrible shoot. The guy had his hand down by his side. What's the problem?" Then camera two, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, no, he was about to shoot that cop, so it was a good shoot." So all these cameras, the camera angles can really make a difference, and but it's hard with, like I said, if one little motion of the hand, like I'm pointing a gun at somebody, now they're in danger of being shot, but I change my mind, I go to put it down, I'm gonna give up, then I get shot, that's a bad shoot now. All it was
a split second,
a 20-degree angle on the barrel, and it's a good shoot and a bad shoot.
How often do you think how often do you think there really is like a bad shoot, like a clearly like indefensible? Like obviously you heard the situation, the one female cop, I think it was in Texas, like she went into the wrong apartment and she thought the guy was breaking in and she shot him.
Yeah, I think there was more to that though. I think there was
like that seems so outrageous. Like that to me, like all right, clearly that was somebody fucked up. Somebody was really maybe she was drunk or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think there was more to that story than
that's the thing. Like that's the other thing too. We're only hearing what social media is telling us. We're not there. So.
So there's one of the best videos that I use a lot for training to show how you can even justify shooting an unarmed person. Is there was an off-duty, there was a cop working like an overtime gig at a hotel. Firefighter just got married. I think it was in Chicago actually. Firefighter gets a cab to the hotel, doesn't want to pay the guy, he gets in an argument with the taxi driver, so the cop starts walking down, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on, man?" Next thing you know, the firefighter knocks him out, he's laying on the ground, the firefighter jumps on top, he's pounding this guy's face in, like collapsed eye socket and all this, so the cop winds up he's able to get his gun out of the holster and just pop off like 1 or 2 rounds, like with the gun barely out of the holster, and he winds up killing the firefighter, unarmed, had no weapons on him, and the cop almost died just from getting his face pounded in. Like the guy's half his face was like destroyed. Now, if I tell you a cop shot an unarmed firefighter, but I don't really give you any other details, probably sounds pretty bad. Now I show you the picture of the cop's face, and you can see that he like almost lost his eyeball because his face got pounded in so bad. But guess what? If you knew Jiu Jitsu, it wouldn't have happened anyway. Stuff like that happens all the time. And if you don't get all the details, it sounds like a bad shoot. I mean, there are plenty of bad shoots. Cops. There was the one in the staircase in New York City. I forget the guy's name. Cop has his gun out there clearing like a dark stairway, and a guy walks out, in the dark, scares the cop. He squeezes his hands, lets a round go, it bounces off something, and shoots the guy and kills him. He wasn't even aiming the gun at him. It was a ricochet, but it scared him, and he had this. I forget there's a phenomenon when you squeeze one hand, the other one squeezes too if you get scared.
Oh, really?
I forget the name of it, but yeah, so that's why they preach, if you have a gun, keep your finger off the trigger. Ricochet shot, and he's doing like 30 years or something in prison. That's clearly a bad shoot, but there was no intent. It wasn't a murder. He wasn't aiming at the guy. He had his gun out because something happened in the hallway, and they were clearing this hallway out, and it scared him. Now the guy's dead.
Do you think that, I know there's a psych evaluation all cops have to take just to be on the force, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that there's some people who just kind of, they got the career in law enforcement, but they're not really cut from the right cloth? You know what I mean? People who just shouldn't be cops.
Yeah.
Who make it through. How do you think that happens often, or do you think that they get weeded out naturally? Because I feel like a lot of times, those might be the people that are the ones making the bad shoots, or the ones that end up in these situations where, they've done something indefensible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, so
I feel like those are the guys who give the good cops a bad name.
Yeah. So just a sidebar here. So a lot of people, including myself, feel that in order to become a cop, you should be at least a blue belt in Jiu Jitsu, because of not just the knowledge that you gain in terms of controlling people and all that stuff, but the exposure to basically getting your ass kicked for a couple years. That stress inoculation, it changes you, and
Absolutely.
if you go through a year or two of getting choked out, getting beat up by much bigger, stronger, better grapplers, not everybody's cut out for that.
Yeah.
A lot of people drop out of jiu-jitsu before they get their blue belt. It's like the dropout rate is really high. I forget. It's like 80%. It's crazy. But if you're able to do all that, and by the time you're a blue belt, even when you're getting choked out and you're getting your arm ripped off, whatever, you're usually pretty calm. There's very little panic. You're, hey, okay, this guy is about to choke me, but I can still work out of this. I'm keeping my composure, and it carries over very well to law enforcement. I'm running after a guy, and he might have a gun, he might not, I don't know, but I'm keeping my breathing good because I'm running after the guy. Once I catch him, the fight's not over. I still gotta control the guy, get him in custody. I'm not relying on my firearm necessarily to yell at the guy, give him commands. I'd much rather just put my hands on him, unless I know he has a gun or something. That changes things a little bit if gun's in their hand. But if you're not able to be violent with somebody without killing them, sometimes you do have to do that. It's up to them, not up to me. But if you aren't able to have that violent tendency but you can control it, if you can't do that, you probably shouldn't be in this job, because a lot of people, they get into that mode where
they start seeing red.
Yeah, and we all know those guys. You start losing. In the book on combat, he talks about at different heart rates, like what starts to happen to your body and your brain, and you get the tunnel vision. You're breathing. You get short of breaths, and now you're reducing the oxygen that's going to your brain, so it's affecting cognitive ability, and you're losing fine motor skills. So all these things are starting to happen under stress, and if you can't control that, you know, you could be in for a real bad day, you know, so you might wind up getting, you know, hurt real bad because they're going to, you know, pound your face in. Who knows? They're going to take your gun, you know. And now, I mean, there was recently a video, some woman, female officer found a guy who was wanted for murder in some other state, and she starts talking to the guy. Do you see the video?
No.
So next thing you know, the guy takes a gun out and he puts it right in her chest, and she's like kind of deflecting it a little bit to the side, but he, you know, he's still pointing it right towards her, and she's the pitch of her voice goes up like 100 octaves. She's begging the guy. She's like, "I'll let you go. Just don't kill me. You can leave. I won't." You know, she's in sheer panic mode, and never does anything except for begging for her life. Which, I mean, she didn't die, so it worked. But then her partner comes running up, and he shoots the guy in the chest. You know, so it showed that panic. Like she's her voice alone, you can hear the panic in her voice. You know, she did the right thing. She at least put her hands up, and it kind of knocked the gun offline a little bit. So even if the guy did pull the trigger, I don't think it would have hit her. But she had no plan to fight back. Her only plan was to beg for her life.
Yeah.
You have to have some fight in you, you know. And if you don't have that mindset, like, I'm not dying today, you know, it's either you or me, and it's not going to be me, you know. But part of that is training.
Well, that's the thing too. Like, you can't be so afraid that you might take a punch, and that your first reaction to everything is to pull out your firearm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what the great thing about training is. If you have that self-confidence, that you know you could handle yourself at least to a certain degree, you're going to be less quick to take everything to that that high level.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're already over an hour, man. I like this.
Time flies when you're having fun, man.
You have any little nuggets of wisdom to leave on the listeners before we go?
Train hard.
Train
That's
hard.
it, man. Find a good jiu-jitsu school if you want to get into that, which I recommend you do. I don't want to make fun of other martial arts. I try not to bash other things, but there's plenty of bullshito and other Facebook and Instagram pages that show you what those other martial arts are all about. But if you do that, hey, I'm not judging. I'm just saying, if you want to learn how to actually fight and protect yourself, protect your family, whatever, find yourself a good jiu-jitsu or whatever, grappling school. Buy a gun, learn how to use it, and buy it legally, please.
Where can the listeners find you? What's your handle? Instagram,
TacPackJack, TacPack, I think, JACK, TacPackJack.
I think that's right.
That's right.
I'm gonna put a link for it in the show notes. So if you guys have something to say, any questions, anything you think we missed, write us in. Look us up: Twitter, Instagram, email address APodAmongstMen@gmail.com, and we will see you guys next week. Peace.